In this video, you're going to go ahead and learn about the built-in children prop. This is a fantastic tool, and it makes it really easy to pass in custom JSX to a given component. So right now, all of our components know exactly what they need to render. It is explicitly defined right inside of the component's render method. Right here, for example, we have a div, a form, an input, and a button, and sometimes a paragraph tag. In Indecision app, we have a div, a header, action options, and add option. But what if we had a component like a layout component? What if we wanted to render a header and a footer, and then we wanted some stuff in the middle to be dynamic, specific to each individual page? How exactly would we set that up? Well, let's go ahead and mess around with that. We're going to make a stateless functional component right here, a const layout. We'll set that equal to our arrow function, and we're going to go ahead and return some JSX for the layout. Now, there are going to be two things that we're going to have on every page, a header and a footer, and then there'll be the dynamic stuff. So right here, we'll set up the root div, and we'll set up the header and the footer. For this example, we're just going to use paragraph tags for the header and the footer. But you could imagine that I might have a header and a footer component that get rendered right here. So we have this layout, and we can render it to the screen. I'm going to get rid of Indecision app just temporarily, and we'll put layout in there instead. I save app.js, and over inside of the browser, I get header and footer as expected. Now let's say, though, I'm on a specific page, and I want to be able to pass the JSX for that page in. How do I do that? Let's go ahead and create some JSX, and we'll try to get it rendered inside of layout. So right here, we are going to define const template, and then we'll just set up our JSX. I'll start off with a div, and then maybe inside of here we have the page content itself, an h1 with a page title. And then we have the actual content below. For now, we'll just make it a paragraph tag. This is my page. So we have this data and we want to render it dynamically inside of here. How are we going to get that done? Well, we know when we want to pass data into a component, we just pass it in as a prop. So right here, I might set something up like content, and I might set it equal to that JSX template. Then I could go ahead and reference that prop inside of layout. Right here, I first need to name that argument. Remember, it gets passed in as the first argument to our stateless functional components. Then right here, I can go ahead and use it. I can reference props.content. And this is going to work. I save app.js, and over here we get page title, and this is my page showing up in the layout, which means the layout can now be used for other pages. I just define the JSX specific to that page, I pass it in to the content prop, and it gets rendered in the correct location, with the header and the footer always being rendered on every single page. Now, this is obviously one approach we can take, but there's actually a different way to pass JSX into your components. What we do is instead of using the self-closing syntax, we actually create a separate opening and closing tag. So we open up uppercase layout, and then we close it like we would close an HTML element. Now, the cool thing about doing this is we can define JSX right inside of here. Much like we define nested JSX or HTML, we can just put the stuff we want to render in layout right inside of layout. So I might have a p tag, and we'll give this p tag a text value of this is inline. Now, currently, we're not using it, but when you pass something into a component like this, you have access to it via the children prop. This is created for us. That's why it's called the built-in prop, as opposed to a prop that we would manually set up ourselves. So that would be available on props for a stateless functional component, or this dot props for a class-based component. So right here, it would be props.children. Now, if we go ahead and save app.js, what are we going to get? We are going to get our header. We're going to get this is inline, and then we're going to get our footer, which is fantastic because we defined it right inside of here as opposed to passing it in as a prop. And this allows us to create applications that give a little more context when you look at the code. So if I toss an opening parenthesis before layout and a closing one over here, we can just break things out onto multiple lines. I can then nest my paragraph tag inside, and it's a whole lot easier to visualize this as opposed to having some sort of JSX defined elsewhere and passed in as a prop. It's really clear that the paragraph tag is a child of layout. Now, we could add as much complexity inside of here as we want to. I can take this div, for example, copy it, remove the paragraph tag, and paste it in. If I go ahead and save the file, we're going to get that showing up to the screen. And it's not coming from this const anymore. It is just defined right in line. Now, it's important to understand this technique because we're going to see it used when we work with third-party components. In the next couple of videos and later in the course, we're going to be installing and using components we did not write. And that means they're going to have their own API. They're going to expect certain things to be passed in. And a lot of that is going to involve us passing in JSX. So think about a modal, for example. We have the final version over here. If I add an item, and I click what should I do, we get our modal. Now we're not going to define this background or the actual little box. All we're going to define is the stuff that goes in the box. For example, our title, the actual item that was picked, and a button that closes the modal. So we're going to write those three things and we're going to put them inside of the component that we get from the library. Now, I don't expect that to make sense just yet. All we need to know for the moment is that we can pass JSX into a component, and that component can choose to use it if it wants. In the next video, we're actually going to install and use the modal component. For now, though, let's just go ahead and bring the application back to where it was. So I'm going to remove the parentheses, and I'm going to set up Indecision app once again. And this time I can just use the self-closing syntax as I'm not passing any children in. The last thing to do is make sure the app is back and working. It is. So in the next video, we're going to start working with React Modal. I'll see you then.